Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, techinterview.guide, and welcome to the stream. Today we've got Laura Langdon with us, and we're going to hear all about Laura's background. You're going to notice some stuff's not working on the screen today. The chat components that I use to have your chat like over there on the screen, totally busted. I don't know. They're throwing errors on their side. It is not working. So we'll get chat showing up on the screen at some point. Twitch chat is still working though. We see Ethan's dad 3D in chat. Hey, good to have you dropping by. So Ethan's dad 3D is the channel that I was hanging out on. So Laura and I were chatting earlier about AI and AI generated imagery and so on. And Ethan's dad 3D has been doing a lot of stuff with the DALL-E art generator kind of thing. And Laura's got things to say. So we'll definitely dive in on some of that. We got Ken, aka Frosty, throwing a ton of emotes. Robo Oso, good to see you. Got a raid like immediately as soon as we go. We got a raid from Metal and Coffee. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for the raid of 84 people. That's fantastic. Hope you all are having a fantastic Sunday. We literally just went live like a minute ago. So welcome. My name's Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, Tech Interview Guide, and I love helping people out with career advancement, interview preparation, how to get jobs in tech, all that kind of stuff. But I also love having different kinds of folks on the stream who can help shed a little more perspective and views on what it's like to be in the tech industry or just the industry in general. And so I reached out to a whole network of folks, and Laura said, "Hey, I would love to come chat with your folks." So appreciate that. So Finance Singularity, good to see you as well. I hang out on your stream all the time. You have no idea how I'm not following. I don't know either. I mean, I've been begging you to come over on my stream at some point. So one of these days, Finance Singularity is going to be a guest on here, hopefully, in this little window over here where Laura is. But yeah, it's good to have everybody in. So Laura, let's start with some introductions. Tell us about you, kind of your journey. How you ended up in like technical writing, what that kind of role is like. Kind of take us through that whole bit.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so it's kind of a long story, a long and winding road to be Beatlesy about it. But so most recently, I was a math professor at California State University East Bay until December, in fact. So really
Okay.
quite recently, and I was a lecturer, an adjunct, and we made no money, really no money.
In
And so even
academia, you make no money in academia?
I
Say it isn't so.
I know, but like, just to give actual numbers, I made $30,000 a year.
Wow.
I live in the San Francisco Bay Area.
That's not even going to pay for
Great.
parking in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Basically, no. Basically, no.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and then even the tenure track professors, at the early stage career ones, we're only on about $55,000 a year, and all of this is publicly available information. So I'm not actually spilling any tea here, because it's a public university, and $55,000 a year in the Bay Area is also nonsense. What do you do with that? Nothing.
Right.
Yeah, so that wasn't going to work out, but I loved teaching, and so I thought, okay, well, I'm where do I go from math? And so I thought, okay, well, okay, data science, that's sort of the obvious next step. And so I started working on that, and I liked some of it, but my heart I wasn't excited particularly about becoming a data scientist. What I did become excited about was AI ethics, responsibility in AI, but it's kind of hard to get into that without actually being a data scientist first. And so that was my plan right up until and then I thought, and I'll just keep teaching once we were pivoted to remote learning because of the pandemic. I was like, yeah, this is fine. I'll just keep teaching. I'll teach like one class, in the one class a semester, remotely, and that'll be great. But then in November, the university announced that everything would be in person in spring. And
Interesting.
I have highly reactive airways, and the buildings are not ventilated. And I was like, okay, no, because I'm not going to die for this $30,000 a year job
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. Not worth it.
Oh, no.
Not worth dying for any amount of money, by the way, but especially for
Sure.
$30,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, okay, and it was just breaking my heart to be leaving teaching altogether. And so then serendipitously, in the same week or so, same 2 weeks that the semester was wrapping up, people on Twitter were talking about technical writing. I was like, oh, what's that? And I looked it up, and Google refers to it as technical writers as people like a rare breed who like live at the intersection of teaching skills and technical skills. And I was like, oh, hi. So that, and then, but I felt a little bit guilty about pivoting again, like pivoting my pivot.
Okay.
And so I kind of sat on it for about a week, and then talked to my husband about it. And he's like, yeah, I think maybe you should just do that. So I did. That was 2 days before Christmas. And on, I think, about January 11th, I was featured on the Diversify Tech newsletter. And I didn't know that was going to happen when I signed up on the website. And so all of a sudden, one Thursday morning, I heard from 4 different founders, like cold emails from 4 different founders. I was like, okay, what happened? Because like, you don't just go from nothing to 4 cold emails in the same 2-hour period
Right.
for no reason. And one of them actually said, oh, hey, I found you one. I was like, gotcha. Okay. And then one of them was my favorite, and they were one of the first, not the actual first, but one of the first to make me an offer, and that was the offer that I was holding out for. So here we are.
Awesome. That's great. So how long have you been doing tech writing then? About a year and a half, 2 years?
Oh goodness, no. My start date was February 22nd.
Oh, this year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Very cool.
Uh-huh.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Hey,
because
hey,
I was
Driftwood.
still teaching until December 14th.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Okay. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to take just a quick moment and get the chat showing up here on the screen. Lots of folks chatting in. So if you've got questions about AI ethics, start dropping those in chat. We're gonna get some of these questions over to Laura as well. And I'm gonna be dropping Laura's Twitter and all that kind of stuff in chat kind of as we go. Ken, aka Frosty, says, I've been working with GPT-3 lately. It's amazing for summaries and translations, but using it for really generative things like write me a poem is kind of a crapshoot, and the ethics surrounding it is intriguing. We were talking about Ethan's dad 3D, who has been doing a lot of really cool live streaming around let's get the DALL-E art kind of thing going. So let's get that conversation going. So how, like, when we talk about, you know, data and machine learning and things like that, we have to give it sample data.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we getting that sample data from? Because this also
Mm-hmm.
kind of drifts into like GitHub CoPilot, and where's GitHub CoPilot
Right.
getting its code that it's helping
Yeah,
you
yeah,
write
yeah.
the code in VS Code and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go down that path a little bit. Where are people getting
Yeah.
the data to feed into the machine learning on these things?
I mean, it varies from group to group. With DALL-E, I believe it was crawling. I mean, so I think OpenAI has let me see if I can find it. They might have actually said where they got their data. But one of them, so one of the company that I always recommend for this is Hugging Face. And
Hugging
they
Face,
have, I
okay.
think it's called Mini DALL-E. Um, Mini DALL-E. Yeah, okay. And so this, I think, is the gold standard for how to do this well.
Okay.
I will drop a link in the Twitch chat.
Awesome.
If I can find it. There we go. And I don't know if it would be helpful for me to share my screen so that we can look at this, or
I don't have
or you
my
two.
OBS set up. I don't have my OBS set up for you to share your screen, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let's see, if you want to send me the link over the Video Ninja, I can switch to a
Sure.
panel where I can maybe show that.
Mm-hmm. Picture's worth 1,000 words. So here we go.
All right, let's Just give me a moment, folks, to do that.
Sure thing.
So the system that I usually use to have chat and everything up on the screen is broken today. They're throwing 500 errors, so bear with me as I work through all this stuff with Laura, and we'll get some of the stuff up and running here
So while
momentarily.
that's working,
Yeah.
what I like about this and what people will see when you've brought it up is that the at the bottom of the very front page of the DALL-E Mini um, site is bias and limitations. And
Okay.
so they say, while the capabilities of image generation models are impressive, they may also reinforce or exacerbate social biases. While the
Mm.
extent and nature of the biases in DALL-E mini model have yet to be fully documented, given the fact that the model was trained on unfiltered data from the internet, it may generate images that contain stereotypes against minority groups. And they document this in full in the DALL-E mini model card. So if you click on that toggle menu down there that says bias and limitations.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah.
Let me zoom
And
in on
then
this too.
there's a link to the DALL-E mini model card at the end of that paragraph. And
There we
so
go.
this is why Hugging Face is the gold standard. So they
Okay.
bring out the model cards for all of their models, and it tells you where it came from, and if you keep scrolling, it'll show where they got their data, and it'll discuss what biases they've encountered so far, what they're trying to do to combat them, but it never pretends like they're ever going to be able to make it perfect.
Interesting.
And so this actually came up really recently in my personal life, because my husband got in on a private beta for an image generating company,
Okay.
and he was showing it to me. He was like, "Hey, this is so cool!" And I was thinking, it's $30, and then you get more than just your two goes. You get server time basically. And I was like, oh, okay, but before we give people money, we have to determine whether they're actually doing this well.
Mm.
And basically, their entire protective mechanism was don't make bad things with our software. And if we find out that you've made bad things, then we're going to ban you.
Interesting.
But that's all. And I used when
Hmm.
my husband was like, well, what kind of harm can actually come from this kind of thing? I actually used GitHub CoPilot as an example,
Right.
because there was somebody who was working on robotics, was writing some code in GitHub CoPilot, and it recommended a username to put in their comments or something like that. Anyway, it was coming up with an actual username, and they followed it, and it was for a real person
Oh,
who
interesting.
is a doctoral candidate working on robotics. And that student wrote a ton of to-dos. And
Okay.
so that's right, because that's what this person was writing. They wrote a to-do, and then GitHub Copilot said, oh, I know this one. When people write a to-do in robotics code, they are
This is where I
that
need to
guy,
go get it from. Oh, they are
right?
that guy. Oh, interesting.
Yes. And so it was actually putting his username in other people's code.
Wow.
Yep. And it was, really him. And so that's,
Huh.
personally identifiable information, PII.
Yeah. Yep.
And it had no mechanism for preventing that.
Right.
Now, that wasn't detrimental, it wasn't dangerous as such. He's fine. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
hurt him, but it's a little bit creepy, right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah. For sure.
that's just, and it's not even good. Like, it's not even helpful. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wants somebody else's username showing up in the code.
For sure. Just to let
Mhm.
everybody know where we're going with this discussion today, when we talk about AI and bias and things like that, when we talk about interviewing and getting ready to interview for jobs, one of the first things you have to do is apply for that job, and you have to upload your resume or upload some kind of profile about yourself into a system, which then goes through, software selection, and then a human gets to see it, and then they make their selection. It goes on to another human, and they make their selection. And as humans, we have our own inherent bias. We have, very obvious biases or biases, but we also have unconscious bias. But the people that wrote all the software for the applicant tracking systems and how to, build out that profile form in the first place, like those people are also then building their bias into that software. And so how is it really selecting you to present to the first set of humans that are seeing, your name and so on? And there's been discussion in the tech industry for years around, do applicant tracking systems bias for or against certain kinds of names or certain kinds of profiles? Because when we build systems, we kind of build our own inherent bias into things. Like if anybody remembers back in the 70s and 80s when they were first building airbags, they were completely baffled and had no idea why women and children were being killed by airbags when they were meant to save lives. Well, the only lives they were saving were modeled after the 6-foot tall, 200-pound men that were designing the airbags. They were the only people getting saved because they built that bias into the construction of the airbag. And so these are things that we have to think about as developers as we're building this stuff, that we're unknowingly, sometimes knowingly, building the bias into what we do. And we are the first users of what we build, but we're not the end users of what we build. And we have to take that into consideration as well. What Laura is talking about here, though, is taking that bias to like this whole other level of like, we have to train, all this AI, and we have to do all this machine learning so that we can come up with these generated, pieces of art, these fun little like Deadpool as a goldfish as a Disney character kind of thing that I was doing on Ethan's Dad 3D's channel last night. And like, how do we go get that data? Well, that software has to go out and say, okay, well, let me go find all the pictures of Deadpool. Let me go find all the pictures of goldfish. Let me go find all the pictures of whatever. But like every picture of Deadpool is going to be copywritten by somebody. And yet it's going out and it's finding all this stuff on the public internet and saying, this is mine now. I'm going to train on all this. And now I'm going to make that for you. And now this is yours. It's like, but do you really own that? Because it came from copyrighted work in the first place. And so what Laura was just explaining is how things like GitHub CoPilot are also doing the same kind of thing. They're going out and they're grabbing little bits of code from publicly accessible source code, but maybe from white papers and so on, saying, hey, I'm helping you generate that connection to that database that you want. Here you go. But where did that code actually come from?
GitHub. It came from GitHub.
Yeah.
All of GitHub Copilot is from public GitHub repos.
Right.
Yep.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you should have like, well, I mean, you have read access to it because it's public on GitHub, but do you have access to use it? Like, do they have a license around it?
Absolutely.
Is that license compatible with the license that you want on your software, or can your company even use that? So those are all things to take into consideration there for sure. So yeah.
Right.
So if you've got questions or comments about that, absolutely put them in chat. We'll kind of look at that kind of as we go. Driftwood says neural networks are crazy interesting. And don't the neural networks also learn from each other as well? Do you know anything about that, Laura?
I mean, well, it depends. If they're connected, they could, but they don't inherently learn from one another. I mean, certainly in the sense that
like they're not going to go discover one another and go, oh, cool, you've also got this like collective hive, knowledge or anything, right? I mean, you have to purposely put them together, don't you?
Yes. Now, could you create sometime a situation in which you've got some kind of a, I don't know, a repo of some sort that has links to all of a bunch of neural networks that, I mean, a neural network, that's a model. I mean, it's an algorithm. It's a means of understanding data and making predictions with data and so on. But it's not the only one. There are lots and lots of them. And so yeah, but they're basically siloed essentially. So you would have to, at the moment, actively connect them, like point them at one another.
Gotcha. Okay.
By some means. really, it would be hard to point them at each other, but it wouldn't be too hard maybe to point them at one another's results. I mean, actually, there's um, generated adversarial networks sort of work that way, where they build on each other. So I don't. We probably don't need a link to that, but that would be sort
Yeah.
of an example. But
Okay.
that's a different model, actually. I mean, it's a different algorithm.
Gotcha. Okay.
For anybody who's interested in learning more about algorithmic bias, I highly recommend the film Coded Bias, featuring Dr. Joy Wolamwini and Dr. Timnit Jabran and Dr. Kathy O'Neill and lots of other people. I've just dropped a link to it in the Twitch chat. And that's super helpful. I built an algorithmic bias unit in my mathematics, let's see, modern mathematical contributions to modern society course,
Okay.
which was the last course that I put together. And my students found this film really, really helpful to understand what algorithmic bias is and some of the harms that can come from algorithms run amok.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, that's cool. So you left kind of this world behind, and then you got into technical writing. Do you actually still do
Mm-hmm.
technical writing about data science and things like that? Like you've got a little bit on your website, but what kinds of technical writing are you into these days?
Let's see. So I work for a company called Suborbital Software Systems, and that has nothing really to do with data science at all.
Okay.
I can drop a link to our blog and our, or well, really, I mean, mostly I work on our documentation, so maybe docs would be better. Um, okay, I can drop that in the Twitch chat. There we go. And so I have written some blog posts for Suborbital on our blog, and I also write documentation for our software. And our company is very young. I think it might be a year old now. Yes, because the employee number one had their first anniversary, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Nice.
So it's a little baby
Pretty young
company.
company. Yeah, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of my career working at like really really early stage startups, and it's interesting to see the kind of impact that you can have when you're at a small startup. But I generally coach like new people in the tech industry to not go into a startup as their first job because it can be very high pressure, and you need to be able to be self-directed and self-learning and sort of self-motivating, where in a
Mm-hmm.
larger company, if you're still learning how to do things and you haven't quite built up that, self motivation, let's dive in, let's go see what this thing does and go down rabbit holes and learn and so on. That maybe a larger company is going to give you more support around that kind of thing. But
That is absolutely true. And suborbital is just a counterexample.
oh, really?
And oh yes, absolutely.
Nice.
So I had very little interest in startups for exactly the reasons that you just articulated.
Okay.
But Connor, the founder of Suborbital, was one of the people that reached out to me,
Hmm.
and I looked at the Suborbital website and several others in the same day, because it was that day that I heard from four founders. And when it was, I think, maybe the third one that I looked through, because I was just going in order. And the first site that I looked at it was for a data science company, and there were 11 employees, 10 of whom appeared to be men. And all of the people who appeared to be men had titles like software engineer or CEO or CTO or things like that. And the one person who appeared to be a woman had a job title of company manager or something. Anyway, basically her job was, I do all the stuff that nobody else wants to do. It was some kind of operations manager. That's what it was, operations manager. And I was like, oh, okay, I see.
Hmm. Yeah.
And almost all of the men were either white or Asian. And I'm just looking at them like, okay, I don't know. Maybe you're reaching out to me because you recognize that this is a limitation that you have, and that you want to do better.
Hmm.
But I don't have the energy to do that work, to be
Yeah.
the person that has to tell you, okay, so in fact, I need you to not have company meetings that are all playing some video game that you all love and I don't care, because
Hmm.
that's not cool, and so on. And then I looked at Suborbital's site, and there were only 4 people, and 2 of them were Black,
Okay.
and one of them appeared to not be a man. And I started checking out Suborbital, and I could see like this was walking the walk, like instantly denying any possibility of a pipeline problem.
Awesome.
Right? Like that this was already walking the walk on diversity and inclusion. And so then and there was a Discord. And so I hopped onto the Discord, and community calls. They had community calls once a month, and there was one scheduled for between when Connor had reached out to me and when our chat was going to take place. And so I hopped into their community call, and in a lot of companies, it's pretty common for people to talk over one another, for someone to suggest an idea and then someone else to say the same thing in different words and take credit for it, on purpose or otherwise. And this was just the opposite of that. Everybody was, oh, I'm talking about this thing that I've been doing, and hey, you should talk about the thing that you've been doing. And I noticed in particular that this also applied to people who weren't white men.
Okay.
That it was absolutely amplifying voices. And I was just like, I don't even know what your product is, but I want to be on this team.
That's awesome.
And because I knew I wanted to work with awesome humans, like that was the most important thing to me. I just do not have the patience to do otherwise.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One of the things I did while you were chatting is I actually updated a little progress meter that we've got across the screen. So we're raising money for a diversity in tech fundraiser as well for the
Oh,
remainder of
fun.
the year. We actually did a fundraiser for my first year of streaming, and we actually gave that money away to a group in San Francisco called Hack the Hood that basically helps increase diversity in tech. They're a registered
Mm-hmm.
charity, and their whole mission is to increase diversity in tech. And so we raised $5,000 for them. And then
That's
we
great.
came home and we reset everything, and so I just updated that. So we're up to about $122 and change. We're going to try and raise another $1,500 by the end of the year. We'll be doing another big like month-long giveaway fundraiser kind of thing in the month of October. I'll probably be doing some kind of 3D printed giveaway again for the holiday season, so that you'll get the things in time for holiday season and so on. And then at the end of the year, we're going to find another group to donate that money to. And then we're going to reset in January, and we're going to raise money again through the whole of 2023 because my employer is matching it on a calendar basis. And so when we did the match back in June, they matched the $1,500 against the $3,500 that we raised. And so that pulled together into the $5,000. But that was my calendar year, like for the whole calendar year. So this
Oh,
next
gotcha.
fundraiser that we're doing, I'm matching all of this money too, by the way. So this is just money that I make as a streamer and doing like private resume reviews and so on. And so if you want a resume review, we do those on the stream as well. I dropped a link in chat if you want to submit a resume. As I have guests on the stream who are in like engineering manager types of roles or hiring types of roles, we'll kind of break down like what I look for in a resume, what they look for in a resume, because it's important to hear different perspectives. This is why I love having different folks on the stream like Laura, where we can kind of hear from their perspectives and the things that they've gone through in tech and how they've gotten into the tech industry and things that they face, and the whole death by 1,000 paper cuts, kind of things that we hear
Hmm.
stories about all the time. And so yeah, I've just been doing everything I can to raise awareness around diversity. And so yeah, we're gonna raise that money, and then I match all that money, and then next year when we start that, we're gonna raise money. I'm gonna match that money, and my employer's also gonna match on that as well. So we're looking forward
That's
to that.
wonderful.
Yeah, so interesting. So company culture is a really interesting thing. How do you sort of screen for that during an interview? Like when you're interviewing with a company and researching a company and trying to get to know people at a company, what kinds of questions do you ask, or like what sort of flags do you look for? Like when you were looking at suborbital, for example,
Hmm.
how did you come to the decision, besides just like some of the things that you were looking at of like, oh, it looks like they're actually, walking the talk, as you said.
Hmm.
Um, how do you actually make that determination that they weren't just like stock photos or things like that? Like how do you know that this company was going to be one of the good ones to go work for? Especially as a woman in tech, like, because that's
Hmm.
that's important to a lot of folks. Like you have to feel comfortable of, for being who you are, being yourself on the job without fear of like how you're going to be treated or mistreated and so on. How do you screen for that?
So, I mean, suborbital is sort of an unusual case, because the community call part is
Mm,
not all companies do that. And so I knew that they weren't just thumbnails because they were on the video and they
okay.
were talking about what they were doing, So that would be a pretty elaborate ruse.
Ruse for sure. Yeah.
And yeah, it is not super plausible. Also, one of the two black employees is the director of engineering, so he's also one of the people who interviewed me.
Okay.
And so that was, and I said exactly what I said to you, which was that I literally don't even know, I don't understand particularly what the product is at Suborbital, but you all just seem like awesome humans, and I want to work with awesome humans. And that was what I was told, was that they were selecting for awesome humans. Like technical skills are great and all that, but the biggest priority was awesome humans. And so every single person that I work with is an awesome human, and I cannot believe how lucky I got. And so in terms of things that can actually scale beyond our excellent company, although there's absolutely nothing stopping other companies from being excellent in the same ways. Um, if I were interviewing again, I would want to talk to people who are current employees, and if that's a problem, that's a red flag.
Hmm.
Um, and I have children, and so some people say don't mention your children in an interview because people might be biased against you. And I am
Sure.
privileged enough to not have to take the first job that is offered to me. And so I have the privilege to just throw it out there. Like, I'm coming at you with everything.
Mhm.
I have ADHD. I have children. What happens if my kid gets sick?
Right.
And so on, just like, and how do people respond? Because if there's hesitation or anything, and in Suborbital's case there was not. The answer was family comes first, always,
Yeah,
and you
that's
do
awesome.
whatever you need to do, and they mean it.
Hmm. I
They
had
mean it.
one I had one boss actually, like at a company all hands, explicitly say, if I find out that you skipped like your kids like, music recital at school to do work, like there's going to be disciplinary action, like almost to the point of like we're going to write you up if I find out that you're working instead of doing like the family
Hmm.
thing. And we're like,
Right.
wait, what? Like, seriously? Like, it was such a game changer for sure. Ethan's
Hmm.
dad 3D says in chat, the company where I work interviews the same way. The leadership and the team are just great, enthusiastic people. Yeah, it makes a big difference when you know that the
Huge.
company's being genuine about it. But Laura also brought up, like, you bring up a good point about having that privilege. Like, not everyone's got that privilege either of,
Right.
even having a caretaker to, take care of their kid during an interview, and you see kids running around the background and stuff like that. Like,
Hmm.
I remember one interview I went to, um, I had my wife, and at the time we only had one kid, and I think my wife was actually pregnant with our second, and I was meeting them at a coffee shop to just have like a final round interview, and I'm like, well, why don't you take the kid and like walk around the neighborhood a little bit or something like that. But it was hot outside, and so they ended up coming back to the coffee shop, and my kid came running over and wanted to jump in my lap, and here I am trying to interview with this guy, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, what's that gonna look like and whatever. Um, and I had like this momentary like, oh no, like I've just ruined my interview because they're gonna know that I've got a kid, and it was a startup, and startups,
Hmm.
back then they would bias heavily against people with families.
Sure.
And he's like, oh, cool, like introduce me to your kid, and like tell me, how old are you, buddy,
Yep.
and like all this stuff. And he just started interacting. He was a dad who had a son who was about a year older than mine, and we ended up hitting it off, and our kids ended up playing together, and like I ended up taking the job, and it ended up working out. But there are companies out there who will absolutely bias against you
Right.
for, presenting that kind of stuff, or even
Yep.
admitting like I've got ADHD or something like that. Like, some
Hmm.
people are very open about that kind of thing on Twitter or on their
Hmm.
LinkedIn, and they talk about, their mental health and stuff like that. And we did a whole chat about a year ago when I first started streaming. We had Suchit Parikh and Martin McGovern on here, and we had a whole session just on, hey, you know what, we need to normalize talking about mental health, and we need to
Hmm.
normalize talking about the things that we need from that mental health perspective in the tech industry, because it's not something we should have to hide behind. At
Hmm.
the same time, there are companies who will bias against that kind of stuff, but that's on them. That's not on you. But if you need a job, and
Right.
the companies where you're applying are biasing against that kind of stuff, it's really hard to get those jobs.
Right.
Um, any thoughts, any recommendations on how to sort of traverse those waters?
Yeah, I'm just really not in a position to speak
Mm.
on that because it's not my lived experience.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I can think of more things that other people who are also in fairly privileged positions can do. And actually, I think that what accidentally happened with your kid jumping in your lap in your interview is actually a brilliant hack. And I think I'm going to put it on my like next time I have to interview, I'm going to make sure that my kid comes in and see what
Mm.
happens, because that's brilliant for someone who doesn't have to just take whatever position they can.
Yeah.
um I yeah, I really can't say how to handle it. um I would just be speculating
Yeah. Yeah.
in any
I'd
other
honestly be the same way too.
situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say other things that I noticed when I was interviewing,
Mm.
that were green flags, not specifically on the family front,
Okay.
but we had an interview in the morning, and then he said, "Hey, you should talk to our director of engineering today," and I was like, "Wow, that's moving fast." And he said, "Oh, but he's on the East Coast, and so he'll only be available until 5 p.m. his time." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
that's good. That's good. You're looking out for other people's time. It's not about anything
Yeah.
else." And I also noticed that when I heard back um, from him over, if that was a Friday, I didn't hear anything until 8 a.m. precisely on Monday morning. And I've never actually asked him about this, but I noticed that it was precisely 8 a.m. on Monday morning. And I thought, I think you scheduled this to send at 8 a.m. my time so that I would not be looking at this over the weekend or whatever. And that is like the greenest of flags,
Yeah.
right?
One of the things that I put in my email footer at work is, my time zone is not necessarily the same as your time zone. Please respond when it's convenient for you. Like, don't feel
Mm-hmm.
that you have to respond just because you got this email, kind of thing. A little
Mm-hmm.
more concise, but that's basically the theme,
Yeah.
what I wanted to get across there. Red
Yeah.
Teamer
So
in chat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
both of those were like, we respect our own time and we also respect your time. And that was just great. Sorry, you were saying about Red Team?
Yep. So new person in chat. Red Teamer asked a really good question. What does diversity mean in the context that we're speaking about right now? So diversity could be a number of things. It could be anything from gender diversity to racial diversity to just backgrounds to just walk of life, socioeconomic status. Like diversity covers a lot of things when it comes to hiring and having a broad range of perspectives on the team. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important that you have a wide range of perspectives. Like one of the things that we were talking about earlier was when they were developing airbags, they were developed by men, and so the only people they were saving in car crashes were men and not the women and kids because they didn't
Mm-hmm.
model how to like strap people in properly and have the airbags deploy properly to keep everybody safe. And now, of course, inside modern cars, you get all the like full canopy, like airbags popping out all over the place in order to keep everybody
Mm-hmm.
safe. But it took a long time to get there. When Apple first came out with their health monitoring app on their phone, it monitored all kinds of things that you could put in there, but they had no way at all for women to track a menstrual cycle. It's like, really, you
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a single woman on the team to like think that maybe that's something that people want to track in a medical history thing on a regular basis. Like, so like just
Yeah.
having those different perspectives help us make better products,
Sure.
whether we're writing software, whether we're designing hardware, whether we're building art, or whatever that thing is, or even kind of circling back to the first conversation that we had, is we're doing like machine learning training and AI modeling and things like that. Like we all have bias that we carry, and by having a more diverse team, um, you have more, I guess, checks and balances against those biases to really pay attention to other people. But you also have to be willing to listen to those other people. So
Right.
just having the
Right.
diversity on the team doesn't just magically work. Like
Mm-hmm.
you still have to have the
Yep.
ability to listen and absorb other people's ideas and perspectives. A
Yeah.
follow up question there, real quick. But ultimately, would you hire the most qualified and skilled person for the role? We don't have this concept in my country, so this is new to me.
Oh, yes, yes. So I love this
That's
question.
a good one. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so yes, and if your company is lacking in diversity, then a skill and a qualification that you're looking for is in fact someone that can add to the diversity of your company. It is a
I love that.
skill and a qualification.
I love that.
So
Yeah.
just like we have this conversation in California fairly often right now because um, Gavin Newsom, our governor, has said that if a Senate seat for California becomes available, i.e., if Dianne Feinstein, who is 5,000 years old, retires or otherwise, then he will nominate a Black woman. And
Okay.
people have said, no, but it should just be the most qualified and skilled person, but that's the point, because
Hmm.
if you have, there's not going to be one person who has like the best skill set for being a senator, because there are so many different kinds of needs.
Sure.
And in the United States Senate, we have almost no voices representing Black women.
Hmm.
And so that is it. Like that's it right there.
Yeah, that's a great
That's
point.
missing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great point. That is one of the skills that they're bringing, and so the most qualified
exactly.
person is bringing that perspective that we
Right.
don't otherwise have on that team. That's a
Yep.
great way to think about it. That's a perfect way to
Yep.
think about it.
So yes, you
Yeah.
are hiring the most skilled and qualified person for your team.
Yeah. But isn't selection based on race the definition of discrimination? That would be illegal in my country. Um, that's a good point too. So, I mean, if we're not allowed to say like, oh, my company's only going to hire white people, but at the same time, we're saying like I'm only going to hire a black woman for that role, isn't that also racial discrimination?
Um, I think if somehow the tables were turned and we had a shortage of white dudes in the United States Senate, that would be the time to have that conversation.
Mm.
But that has
Yeah,
never
that's a good
happened.
point.
And
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Red Teamer, you're bringing up great questions, and I appreciate your perspective on that too. Ethan's dad says, I was a writer before I was anything else. I've often thought about moving into technical writing. I've always been afraid to take a pay cut from my software development role. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec. But Red Teamer, you're bringing up great points around, if you're trying to purposely be selective about diversity, is that not discriminating against who you have? And I think your candidate pool doesn't have to exclude those people. I think you can
sure.
still look at a broad range of candidates and say, but this is what we're hoping to find. Like I'm hoping to find a Python developer with a decade of experience who also has a decade of JavaScript, who also has a decade of DevOps, who also has this, who also has this, who
Right.
also has this. The candidate I'm going to end up with is going to have a little bit of this and maybe more of that and maybe a little bit over here. And so we have to look at the whole candidate. We have to look at everything that they bring and then make a decision on, are they our best choice? Like as we go through and we interview people, like when have we interviewed enough people to make a choice? And there's a whole algorithm around like how many people do you have to interview in order to make a choice, and do you wait for a later answer, or do you or like a later candidate, or do you just hire earlier? Like there's a whole interesting thing about that I could get into. But I think you don't necessarily have to close off your candidate pool and say we are only going to take applicants who match this racial profile. As a company, you're saying we are open to the idea of diversity. And so one of the skills that we want people to bring is that perspective. And if you are a white dude and you've got that kind of perspective and you are otherwise a good candidate for the job, then yes, you should qualify. But that doesn't necessarily exclude you from like, oh, you're a white dude, therefore we're not going to select you at all. That would be racial discrimination for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Kamuchas Ganas, if I pronounce that properly, I apologize if I didn't, says, I've worked for several companies, and when I go through the interview process, I work hard and not get frustrated when I feel like I may be discriminated against. I'm looking at it now that I need to be looking for a company that will be a good fit for me as well. Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Like you're interviewing that company every bit that they're interviewing you. You have to feel confident and comfortable with them, and that was hearing from Laura and kind of your perspective around talking with Suborbital and the different folks at Suborbital and how comfortable they made you feel was a good thing. Those are absolutely things that you need to take into consideration as you're interviewing with other companies as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Red Teamer, thank you so much for those questions. Those are great. He says, they say, I support a raceless, genderless, nameless application process where the interviewers have no idea of this information until the interview. I agree. I 100% agree. I've actually
It's not a real thing,
seen,
though.
it's not, but
It doesn't exist.
yeah, but it would be interesting though, like if the resume could like take your name and all your contact information off and just have like, this is a summary of their skill, and you look at that and you look at their
But
code
they've
and
done
things like
that.
that.
They've done that. It does not work.
It doesn't
It does
work.
not
Why
work.
not? Why
No,
not?
no.
Tell
Amazon
us why.
tried this. Amazon
Okay.
tried this, and they made a resume reader, and they based it. What did they base? But you have to give it some data, like right.
Yep.
You have to
Yep.
base it on something. So what did they base it on? They based
Yep.
it on the resumes of their successful engineers.
Yes.
We want to
Who
look for
who
more
were
of what
who
we
were
already have, who were white dudes.
white men.
And right, so you take out
Yep.
the names,
I remember reading about
but
this.
the algorithm is really good at capturing unconscious things. And so what it did was it started rejecting people who had gone to women's universities. It rejected people who had played women's sports. It rejected all kinds of stuff. And it had nothing to do with their names, because like you take the names off in the context, it doesn't matter, because there's also there are ways that people write. So there are certain words that are more likely to be used by some groups than by others, and so on. And so it is 100% impossible to train a resume reader to be unbiased. And I see the question, was that automated? Yes, it was. It can't, it's impossible to make that.
Yep.
It doesn't exist. And then because people make these things, so what they found was that it rejected all women candidates.
Wow.
Just gone. All what it found, what they made was a man finder.
Yeah.
And like they could have
that's not what we need in the tech industry. Yeah.
Right. And so it's actually, it's a much harder problem than people think that it is.
Yeah, and Red Teamer followed up like, I'm thinking of a manual review, but as a manual review,
That's
we
right.
also carry inherent bias and so on. So it's this cascading problem that's really hard to solve. It's really hard to solve. In Spanish, there's also a bias in adjectives that have different spelling based on genders. Yeah. Yeah. This is fantastic discussion. I love this, by the way. Let's go back to Ethan's dad 3D real quick, because he was asking a really interesting question too. Like, I was a writer before anything else. I've often thought about moving into technical writing, but I've been afraid about taking the pay cut. I've also seen this from people who have they want to make a transition into the software industry, but they know that taking a job as an entry-level dev, they're going to cut their salary because they're coming from, I used to be a VP of finance making $300,000-$500,000 a year, and to go get an entry level software job, I'm going to make like 75, 80K a year. Like, that's a huge hit. Yeah. What are your thoughts on like getting into the tech industry, or like getting into a technical writing type of role? Like, what sort of salary ranges do you see in those kinds of roles and so
on? So I was quoted ranges from 60 to 120K, which is in fact, doubling. like the top end is double the bottom end. So yes, there would probably be some, probably if you're already a software engineer, then looking for a job in which you are specifically and exclusively a technical writer would result in a pay cut, which is nonsense. Like, that doesn't make sense. Because it's like it's sort of akin to the sense that front end developers are frequently paid less than back end developers. But in fact, front end development is really hard. And back end developers will say like, oh, but I could never actually do this. But there's still somehow this perception that front end dev is like easier to get into or whatever, and therefore making less. And the same applies, I think, to technical writing. So that's kind of an issue. And so probably in the case where you're already a software developer and you think you'd like to do technical writing, finding a company that doesn't actually have a technical writer, but needs to document their software. And also you'd be writing some software and like documenting what software you're writing. That would probably be the sweet spot, I would think, to be scratching that technical writing itch, while not taking a pay cut. That's off the top of my head. That's probably the best strategy.
Yeah. Driftwood wrote a really great comment in chat. Says, I'm a woman in tech. There are communities that I try to be a part of, and anytime I speak my input, I've gotten laughed at, overtalked, just generally disregarded by outnumbered men. It's a crappy feeling. There definitely needs to be a change, and men's perspectives on, or there needs to be a change on women's perspectives on women in tech. Look back at history like Ada Lovelace. Sorry for the rant. It really irks me. Never apologize for that rant. Absolutely never apologize, especially in my community. I'm all about diversity, and I love hearing different perspectives, and thank you for sharing that. It irks me too, to be honest, and to be
Yep.
like, I'll be fully transparent. I'm a white dude in tech. I've been part of the problem. Over the past decade, I've started sending emails out to people that I've worked with in the past who are not white men, apologizing to them, saying I was a rotten example of what a lead dev should have been or what I should have been in that senior level role. Like, I'm sorry for not being a good example. And I've had people write me back going, yeah, no big deal. And I've had other people write back going, wow, thank you. Like, you're the first person ever to apologize for behavior. Um, and, you know, I've tried reaching out to others and they don't even want to hear from me. And I get that too, because as a white guy in tech, like, a lot of people immediately dismiss anything that I want to try to help with and anything I want to try to say because they're like, oh, you're just a white dude in tech. And I get that. But that's also why I have
Mhm.
folks like Laura on the stream, because I don't want to be that. And I want to have other people and have their perspectives, and I want to have their opinions and thoughts, and because there's so many good thoughts of and ways of thinking about things in the industry as a whole, but also just hearing from the person themselves about the things that they've gone through. It helps educate me, and then I can turn around and I can give better advice to other people. And that's why I have this whole platform, is to help
Mhm.
bring other people's voices kind of to the forefront and so on, because I've got a lot of that privilege in my life as well. And so I find it's important to share those kinds of perspectives. Um, so Driftwood, like I can't share that experience because I have not had that experience, but I know that I've been part of the problem in the past, and I can apologize for my part. And I can say, like, I hope as an industry that we do better, because yeah, I mean, when we think about computer science back in the day, it was all women. Like, women were
Right.
fantastic at math and fantastic at all this stuff, and like looking back at how all those things
Katherine
got started,
Johnson.
it was all women, you know. And at some point it was kind of like changed, where the whole message about like, oh, computers are for men, and
Mhm.
women shouldn't be in the industry, and it was super disappointing to just see this drastic shift. um, so I love that we've got more diversity in the industry now, for sure. Saw some other stuff go by in chat where they were talking about like, um, a while ago I heard that interviewers were making age assumptions based on the domain of your email, like if you had Gmail versus Hotmail versus Yahoo, and so on. And I think that
Mhm.
there's definitely some stigma around some of that as well. In the U.S., it's illegal to ask somebody their age on their application, but there are things that you can infer, like, oh, let's go look at the timeline, and oh, you graduated college, you know, back in the 90s. That means you're old. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, you know, I'm almost like, I'm pushing 50, so I've seen people say like, take all the dates off your resume so that people can't bias against your age. It's like, but as an interviewer, they want to know like, how long were you at that job? Like, how many
Mhm.
years of experience do you actually have? And if you say, well, I've got, you know, 15, 20, 25 years experience, they're like, oh, then you're old. Then you're really old. And we want somebody really young on the team. Like, there's some companies out there, you're just not going to get around their bias no matter what.
Mhm.
But I think companies are trying to do better, but I think that there's a long way to go too.
For sure.
Any thoughts, Laura?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, age bias, another, even if you take off all the dates and you don't talk about term lengths and things like that, the language that people use varies by age. And so it can there's sort of no way to conceal, really there's no point in trying, I think, to conceal age, because it's not going to work. And eventually, you're going to be interviewing, and unless it's a fully remote, cameras off kind of interview, then people are going to figure it out. you know
Mm-hmm.
and so much in sort of similar ways to, what happens if I get sick, what happens if my kids get sick, and so on. I think if you possibly can, then it's better to just bring everything to the front. the opposite, just no trying to conceal anything, and see how people respond. But it is still an issue because age bias, especially in the tech industry, is a serious problem, that I think people are sort of only just so I think one thing that's going to help is that millennials are getting older, right? Like,
Yep.
and so we are going to become the dinosaurs in the next 10 years.
I feel like I'm already there, but I'm on the trailing edge of Gen X myself, but
Okay, sure, yeah. And so I anticipate that that will be changing somewhat, just because so much of the tech industry outside of IBM and Microsoft, to an extent, so much of that is so young. It's so new. It wasn't here, and so it was founded by young people, and but that is going to change, I think. But sometimes it doesn't always work out. Just time does not heal everything,
yeah,
in lots of ways. Like we may have expected after the civil rights movement of the 60s that we would be in a very different position today than we
yeah,
are.
for sure.
So we can't count on it. We have to keep working.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work to do. So
Mhm.
yeah, kudos and props to everybody doing their part, for sure. And Driftwood, thank you for sharing your experience with us. It's important for us to hear that voice, and I know that a lot
Absolutely.
of people are like just tired of telling the story, and so they stay silent, and they're like, this is just my life. But I appreciate that you brought that up. I think it's important, for sure. And followed up in chat and said, why at the end of applications did they have a questionnaire saying, do you have a disability, cancer, mental health, etc.? I know you can answer that you prefer not to say, but does HR actually see that input? I feel in a pickle always on that question, because yes, I've had cancer in the past, but should that be any of their business? Will that in reality be looked at and the hiring company say, oh, they've had a disability, so insurance will be more, or will that be looked at as a disability as far as diversity goes? That's a great question. I've seen that a lot more. So when I went through my job hunt back in December and January, it was asking the same thing. Like, do you currently have any sort of like disability or disadvantage and things like that? And I always wondered, like, I was like bordering on ADHD. I was trying to go through some diagnostic stuff myself around that, as well as I've had surgeries in the past and things like that. You're right on the perspective that companies have no business knowing that as part of their selection. So why are we asking that during the application process? I actually don't know how that information gets used. I don't know whether HR sees any of that as part of it, or if they tell the applicant tracking system, like, hey, we need some percentage of people that have, those kinds of backgrounds or those kinds of disadvantages, or things that have happened to them in life, so that we have that diverse pool. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not sure exactly how that is used.
I don't know.
That would be a great question. The next time I bring someone from an HR team on the stream, I'm absolutely
Hmm.
going to ask that question. So I'm going to take a moment and just write that one down. Um, but yeah, that's a fantastic question of how does that even get used, or does it get used? Um, because they can't ask certain things like that during the application, especially
Hmm.
here in the United States and in Canada, and I'm sure in other countries. Like, we're not allowed to ask your gender. We're not allowed to ask, about, age. We're not allowed to ask whether you have a family, whether you're planning to have a family. Like, we're just not allowed to ask any of that stuff. And so
Hmm.
why are there some questions on the application system that we would otherwise not be able to ask? Um, yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna find out.
Great. Yeah, I'm curious too.
Why do application systems ask about health backgrounds?
So I would say, I've never had one ask me about my physical health background. I have had, do you have one of these disabilities that are identified by the ADA? And ADHD is not one of them. And so I always clicked no. And it would always be, toward the end of the application and in the same neighborhood as the "Are you a veteran?" question.
Yeah. Yeah. And the only thing I can guess, and this is a total speculation on my part, is that when they go into the applicant tracking system, they've got some sort of, like, they're telling it to bias on purpose towards people who opt into sharing that kind of data, so that they have more of that diverse pool of, we want to make sure that we allow veterans, that might otherwise, like, if they don't put it on their resume, we would never know. Or,
Mhm.
if, and if that's something that's important to them, of like, we want to have some of those folks on our team, so that's important to us as a company, then that would be a question that they ask. But they might not be able, they may not be, or they may be restricted from asking about that kind of stuff. Like, do you have a military background or something like that? They may not be able to ask that as part of the interview process. And so they need some way of making sure that they've got some diversity in the candidacy pool. That could
Mhm.
be why. But whether that data is actually viewed by HR or used by HR, I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out this week for you. So Driftwood, I would appreciate having you come back on the stream and hold me accountable to that. I'm going to get you an answer.
I'm going to guess that it's legally required, in fact.
Maybe. Yeah.
And that it's some kind of a it's probably to ensure that you're not being discriminated against on the basis of your disability or your veteran status. That's
Yeah.
my guess.
Yeah. Could be. Ethan's dad says, I always put my race because they're going to find out anyway. And if they're going to discriminate, I might as well not waste my time.
Mhm.
True. But if you're in a position where you need that job, you don't want them to discriminate, then it becomes a barrier to, should I even be applying for this job? I think some of that
Yeah.
you can kind of work out as you're researching companies and getting to know people at the companies, and doing your networking and due diligence on, who is this company? Do I even want to apply for a job there? You want to try to
Mhm.
find out as much of that as you can before you even apply for the job, so that you can find out, like, is this company even one that's worth my time putting a resume together, maybe writing a cover letter and submitting, and sitting and waiting. If you can spend 20-30 minutes, maybe you'll find enough of those flags to be like, I don't want to, maybe I don't want to work there after all. um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think ultimately though, the best way to get a job in tech is to know people. It's all about the
Absolutely.
network. And
Yeah.
so you wouldn't the better strategy, a better strategy than before you fill out an application, you should do, all this research and so on. It should be like reaching out to your network, which has to already exist. And that's the huge hurdle, right? Is that you have to actually know people. And how do you get to know people in tech if you're not already in tech? And it's there, it feels like a little bit of a catch-22. Twitter
Mhm.
is my answer to that question. I don't know how to get a job without Twitter. um and and so if you already know somebody who works at the company or something like that, and it's just all about having conversations. And so actually, I laughed shortly after I was hired with Suborbital, because I realized that I had never gotten a job that I had filled out an application for. It's actually a
Interesting.
100% failure rate for me. Literally none.
Really.
I've had
That's interesting.
jobs, but I have never had a job that I filled out an application for.
Wow, that's pretty great. And it's funny because we get people coming on the stream all the time going, I've applied to like 200-300 companies and I've gotten like
Right.
10 interviews. It's like, it's not
I filled
like,
out a lot of applications,
yeah,
but I
for
have
a lot of folks,
never had.
it is kind of a numbers game of, like, but I
Mhm.
think at the same time, it's really, to me, in my perspective, um, it becomes a numbers game when you make a generic resume and you just blast that out
Yep.
to tons and dozens of
Yep.
companies or hundreds of
Yep.
companies, because you're not showing the value that you bring as an individual to them in that role. And it does take time to sit down and like craft the resume and so on, and to write up a cover letter about why they should specifically be calling you. But that's what's going to stand out. Like when they go into the applicant tracking system, they say, give me the first 10 people that match this, and they start going through and looking at that profile. If they don't quickly see the value that you bring, aside from like, yeah, I've got that technical skill, I got that technical skill, I got that technical skill, if you're not showing them a very compelling reason why they should call you, they'd be like, okay, well, they're, these folks, like, yeah, they're qualified, but I'm not excited about really talking to any of them. But like, look at this one person, look at the projects they've made, look at this cover letter that they wrote. Like, wow, like we need to get them on the phone. That's the person you want to be. You want them to feel very compelled to reach out to you. But that takes time. And time's not always a luxury that people have either. If you've been laid off, especially with the economy right now, if you need a job now, networking is going to get you that job much faster than going through and doing the company research and figuring out where you want to apply and applying for that job. Networking is going to help that in drastic ways. So building up that network on LinkedIn, do me a favor, go follow me on LinkedIn. Here's a link to all my socials. I'm Ian Douglas 736 on LinkedIn and Twitter. Go connect with me on there. Don't just follow me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, because then you can use my network to go figure out, like, do I know anybody at a company that I can make an introduction on your behalf? I'm happy to say, like, hey, this person's been part of my live stream and they're curious about talking to someone at your company. If you've got a minute, I'd appreciate the favor. I will make as many introductions as people want, but you have to connect with me on LinkedIn. Because if you just send me a message and say, like, hey, do you know anybody at Microsoft? It's like, yeah, I know dozens of people at Microsoft. I'm not going to like go blast all 50 of them with an introduction to you. You need to go through my network and figure out, like, who does Ian know at Microsoft? And this is the person. Like, Ian, can you introduce me to Laura at Suborbital? It's like, yes, I can make that introduction because you're sending me that LinkedIn profile to go send that introduction. That makes my life a little bit easier and scalable to help all of you with those introductions. So by all means, utilize my network. I've built up a very strong network of like 3, 4, 5,000 people on LinkedIn and Twitter that I will absolutely make those introductions, but you have to tell me who you want an introduction to, not just at a company level. So go follow me on Twitter, go connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will make introductions. Because if you need a job quickly, networking is definitely gonna improve that. With dreams of working at Postman, we've got openings at Postman. If you want a referral into Postman, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll get you in as a referral.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people ask me, like, how do you Twitter, basically? And for me, I think I literally Googled Twitter accounts to follow for data science or something like that, and found, some list, and started off just following all those people, and then seeing who those people follow. And when I start to see the same name, like all of these people follow, Margaret Mitchell, who was at Google, then that means that Margaret Mitchell that's a pretty strong signal. And
Right.
so I just sort of kept iterating on that process. And so I ended up unfollowing, I think, almost all of the original people that I
Oh
was
wow.
that I was following, because really all I was doing was using them. It was just a jumping off point. It's just
Gotcha.
okay. So, and then who do you follow and who do they follow, and so on, to figure out like the strongest signals amongst the noise. And or if you see an account, like, okay, this person is doing the kind of job that I think I want to do, I'm going to go through and follow a lot of the people that they follow. Or I thought that I really wanted to work for OpenAI, in fact, and so I went through and I followed every single OpenAI employee who had a Twitter account. The
Interesting.
same with DeepMind,
Yeah.
and so on. And then it just sort of curating my feed over time. But the thing is, that takes a long time.
It does.
I don't know
Yeah.
a way to make it faster either.
Yeah.
Um,
So a couple of folks have asked in chat, like, how do you make these connections? And Juggling
mhm.
Biohazards asked a good question. How do you go about reaching out to others? I've had coffee chats, but after the chat, I don't feel like a connection was made that's strong enough to then hit them back up and say, hey, can you refer me for a job? I think it's not like a one and done kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
you do need to kind of build up that rapport over time. And so what I typically recommend is like connect with someone and say, "Hey, I've got like two very specific questions about working at the company if you've got a minute to chat. And if you can't, hang out on Zoom or Google Meet or something, if you could answer these asynchronously because of time zones or whatever, I'd appreciate hearing back from you." Um, and then give them those questions ahead of time before you get on the call or whatever. From there, then you can say, "Hey, I really appreciate your time. Do you mind if I follow up in a week and just chat a little bit more? I'd like to hear more about your background and so on." It started off with, "Hey, can you do me a quick favor?" But then it's following into like, "Hey, like I'd like to chat more." And then from there, you can say like, "Hey, I'm actually really impressed with the company. Does your company have a referral program? I know that it can benefit employees, cash wise and things like that. Would you be willing to make a referral for me?" I mean, you can just straight up ask people. But if you hit them up on that very first phone call and say like, "Hey, yeah, I want to chat about, I've got these questions at your company," and then during that call, "Well, the reason I'm asking is because I want to apply, and can you refer me?" It's like you're kind of like hitting them all at one time. It's like, oh, you're asking for kind of a lot. But as you get to
Hmm.
know them and you get to kind of build up that rapport with them, it makes asking for that favor a little bit easier. But you don't want to just slam somebody with like, "Hey, can you do these 5 things for me?" It's like, "I'll do one thing for you." I think a lot of people are going to get turned off if you ask them for too much too soon, because then it does feel like they're being used, even if there is a referral program. But I think getting to know them a little bit first, and then staying in touch with them over the course of a couple of weeks and say, "Hey, you know what? As I've been researching more about the company, and I appreciate the time that you spent answering those questions for me. I think I'm at a point now where I want to apply for a job. Does your company have a referral program? And if so, would you be willing to submit it, or do you mind if I mention that you and I have had a conversation in a cover letter that I'm going to write?" And then mention that in the opening of your cover letter. Say, "I've been chatting with Laura about this job at Suborbital, and they've been answering some questions for me, and I'm really impressed with the company, and that's why I'm applying." So now you're name dropping in that cover letter. Now they can always go to Laura and say, "Hey, have you been chatting with Ian, this Ian person?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, we've had a couple of conversations." It's like, okay, now they've got validation, and now they can believe your cover letter and believe that story and whatever. And you're more likely to get an interview that way. But it does take
Hmm.
time. It's not an overnight kind of thing.
I see a question in the chat about, is it okay to not answer on LinkedIn when people are approaching you, or would that hurt your reputation? I do always respond at least once. Like if it's a recruiter, I don't just ignore them. I'll say, thanks but no thanks, or I'm happy where I am, or something like that. There's just sort of no need to burn bridges. If I get to a point where I am hearing from 50 recruiters a day, that's going to have to change,
Hmm.
but I'm
For
not there
sure.
yet. So, and probably nobody who's looking for job hunting tips is there yet either.
Yeah. So from the perspective of, if people are approaching you specifically about applying for a job,
Mhm.
it feels a little bit much. And at some point I would just start relaying people and say like, "Hey, like don't don't come to me for a job at Postman. You have to go through a recruiter. But like if you want a referral
Mhm.
into Postman and you and I have had some conversation, then that's a little bit different." And so when I said to Driftwood, like, "Hey, if you want a referral into Postman, that's fine because I understand a little bit about your background and I'd be happy to submit you as a referral." Um, but if like 100 people watch this on YouTube later on, they're like, "I also want a referral in Postman," I reserve the right to, to stop referring people,
Yeah.
because it does take time to like go in and like enter all that information and then have that conversation with people. Like, do you really know all 100 of these people? I mean, I can say up to a limit. It's like, yeah, they're on my live stream. I know a little bit about them. Um, but at some point, it starts to lose its efficiency or efficacy, I think is the word,
Mhm.
where it's not as effective for me to just blast like dozens and dozens of referrals for a particular job. But yeah, I don't mind submitting a couple of people here and there. But mostly what I was saying about LinkedIn is like, if you want me to make a connection for you or an introduction for you on LinkedIn, I'm happy to do that. But I need you to do your due diligence of like going through. So when you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can click on my profile where it says 500 plus connections. You can click through there and then start searching for companies from there. From there, you can then see a list of like who I know at that company, and then you can say, "Hey, Ian, can you make an introduction to Laura at Suborbital?" And it's like, "Yes." Send me a link to their profile. I can go through and I can send them a message saying this person's part of my live stream, blah blah blah. But you have to do some of your due diligence. I used to get hit up all the time. It's like, "Ian, do you know anybody at Google?" It's like, I know probably 100 people at Google, but I'm not going to go send one introduction to 100 people. You need to tell me who at Google you want me to introduce you to. So you need to do some homework on that yourself.
Right. It's that signal to noise ratio.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Caparino says, I don't have a view of a recruiter type of account. When they search for candidates, do they send emails in bulk or are the emails targeted and specific? It can be a little bit of both. So they can say like, I'm looking for people who mention Python on their profile, and they see a list of those people, and then they can go in and they can kind of mass message people. Usually it's like one-off messages, like or they'll have like a what do they call, like a mail merge. That's kind of the old school word for it. I'm sure there's a better term now where they can go in and they can like flag a bunch and it'll like put your first name in there. And that's how a lot of people catch people that just spam recruiter messages on there, is they'll put like an emoji on their name, and if that emoji comes in, then you know that they didn't handwrite the message. Like people that call me William quote Ian on LinkedIn, like, hi William quote Ian. It's like, well, if you knew me, if you spent 2 minutes getting to know me, you know I prefer going by Ian. Legally I'm William, but I go by Ian. That's why it's in quotes. Like, say hi Ian, I'm 100% going to respond to that. But you send me hi William Ian, I know that it's just this, spam kind of thing, and I'm probably going to ignore it. So yeah, I get Kucho or Kamuchis Gana says, I get a lot of contracts or contacts from recruiters. LinkedIn does not always allow me to start a conversation. I don't know why, but I don't usually accept cold contacts sent that way. Recruiters can be helpful to find the first couple of jobs in tech. Once you start building up experience, though, you really don't need a recruiter anymore, because companies will start to find you, or as you directly apply to companies, they're going to see, oh, you've actually got experience. And so you'll need to use recruiters less. But as you gain experience, and Laura, I don't know if you'll have experience with this, but as you gain enough experience, recruiters want to hound you to submit you for jobs, because they make anywhere from 15 to 25% of your annual salary as a kickback from the company. And so as a senior dev who's making like into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, that even 15% on the low end is a huge amount of money if they can get you placed at that job. And so the longer you're in your career, the more likely you're going to get hit up by recruiters. But it is very helpful from that entry level perspective. But a lot of recruiters don't want to help entry level, because again, that 15 to 25% is a much smaller amount of money. But I think some recruiters would actually, I think, when you factor in, it might take 3 months to place a senior dev, and it might take a couple of weeks to place a junior dev. Those junior devs could add up to the same amount of money as placing a single senior dev, but companies also want people with experience. They won't hire you without experience, but you can't get experience unless you get hired, and it's that whole circle.
Right.
Recruiters, you mean recruiting companies, not the HR department. So HR departments will sometimes have internal recruiters, and they'll also use LinkedIn in the same way, Caparino. So whether you're a recruiter who works for a company, or you're like a third-party recruiting agency that's trying to get people hired, like placed at jobs, they'll both have the same kind of interface to use. Zach826, something I struggle with. How do you not be awkward when applying or messaging employers? Practice. Yeah. Laura, how would you approach like a cold contact? Like, you've never chatted with someone before. How would you recommend reaching out to somebody brand new on LinkedIn?
I mean, mostly I wouldn't, in fact. Like, I wouldn't reach out directly to a hiring manager. If I could possibly avoid it, I would be using my network. Um, However, if I if there were a position and I just didn't know anybody, there, and it was a position that I was really interested in, I would be saying, hey, I see you're hiring for this role. This is my background. This is why I think my background will bring this specific set of values, and it's very important to be specific and succinct, and that's an iterative process. You have to practice your elevator pitch, saying why you'd be a good fit for something, in a small number of words. And I think that your company, and this is, coming from my perspective, because I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. It's kind of, I think that sort of mentally switching to almost more of a asking someone out on a blind date kind of mental
Mhm.
model, in the sense that you are dating each other, right? It's a two-way street. And like, this is why I think that your company would be a great fit for me,
Hmm.
as well as me a great fit for your company.
Yep.
This is why I'm interested in the role in particular and the company in particular. And I
Yeah,
think that
that's
you,
good.
you need both.
Yeah, I agree. You have to show the value that you bring to entice
Mhm.
them to call you and want to talk to you. But at the same time, part of that proposition, as Laura just said, is you telling them why you're headed in that same direction.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important, and that's something that I've talked about quite a bit on the stream around like showing the alignment. I hate that buzzword, but that's really what you need to show a company for them to want to talk to you and get you into that interview process. You need to let them know, like, hey, we're headed in the same direction. We might as well be doing this together. Um,
Mhm.
that's a big way to really stand out. When I reach out to companies where I'm researching a company and I'm curious about, some things. What I tell people on the stream, Laura, is when they're researching companies, to build out the spreadsheet of companies are in the columns and your rows are like the values and things that you're looking for, and then you're like filling in that spreadsheet. And if you have a gap, then you need to find someone at the company that you can ask that specific question, like, hey, I'm trying to find out like about diversity stats in the company. I haven't seen your company blog, that kind of stuff. Like, where can I find that information? um, Networking with a company, I generally recommend find 4 people. You want to find somebody who's going to be a peer level in that role. You want to find somebody who's senior level in that role that could maybe mentor you, a hiring manager, and then a recruiter. And you want to ask them all, maybe some of them the same question, but some of them slightly different questions, because they're going to have different perspectives from within the company itself. Like the HR person and hiring manager, you could probably ask them about like, where does the company publish DEI stats? But for the engineers or technical writer or whatever role you're applying to, that's more of that peer and the senior level, you would ask them more about the day-to-day process and so on. And so as you're researching a company, again, if you've got the time to like do the company research, and you don't want to use the network kind of route, or you want to start building up that network, find those 4 people, and then start asking them those specific questions. Give them the option of, do you want to hop on a call to chat, or do you want to do it asynchronously? I think people will appreciate that. But that's how you're going to start building up that network over time. And so from the question of like, how do you not be awkward, it's like you'll get better at it with practice. The first ones are always going to be awkward, but I think reaching out to a company or reaching out to somebody and say, hey, I'm researching the company for an eventual application. I'm not going to apply like tomorrow, but I do have a specific question or two I'd like to ask you about the company. Can we connect? And I'll send them over chat. If they connect, then you send them those questions. Say, thanks for connecting. These are the questions. If you've got time, I'd love to get on a call. That would be the approach that I would do, and it's not going to feel awkward, because you're basically letting them know that you're interested in the company, you're researching the company for a job, but you're not hitting them up to refer you. You just have a question about the company, and then from there follow up and say, I appreciate your time. I'd love to stay in touch if that would be okay. And I think most people genuinely want to help, and they'll be okay with like building out their network of people as well. So I think it'd be fine.
So I just dropped a link in the chat to a post by Rachel Thomas of Fast.ai. The post is entitled "Why You, Yes You Should Blog," and
Awesome.
Rachel's thesis is that you are in the best position to teach someone who is right behind you on
Hmm.
whatever journey you're on.
That's good. That's good.
And so I was doing a deep learning course with through Fast.ai, and so I saw this post, and I started blogging my journey, and most of my posts didn't get very many views, but one of them, from math to data science, how I became a data scientist, or how I'm working on becoming a data scientist from being a mathematician, which is funny now because that's not what happened. But that one got the most views, and I've
Hmm.
I've had the most contacts from folks, including two publishers actually reached out to me. Most recently, Manning
Nice.
said, "We'd love for you to write a book
Hmm.
about this," and I would have done, except that that's not what I did. I did not become a data scientist, and so I can't actually speak to
Yeah.
that anymore. But that having that presence, that profile, and employers absolutely read some of my blog posts, and being able to go back and see, like, okay, this is what I always wrote to myself as an audience, basically. And so while I was working through a lesson, or working on learning something, I would write notes about the thing. Like, this is something that I got stuck on, and this is how I got unstuck,
Hmm.
or I never did
That's
get
great.
unstuck. These are all the things that I tried. None of them worked. Darn. And so on. And so then that meant that employers could see um, that
The
I
journey.
was a self-starter. I was working, by myself on learning these things, and this is how I approached problem solving. When I encountered something that I didn't know, these are the ways that I would try to solve my problem. And if I got stuck and I simply could not solve the problem, I didn't just stop.
That's
You
great.
move on, and that's important in any kind of technical role. You're going to reach problems where you're like, I literally cannot solve this, and employers do not want you to sit there for 6 months saying, okay, maybe I'm going to try this other thing, or whatever. They want you to be able to say, I have reached the point of diminished returns on this,
Yeah.
and now I'm going to use my time in a better way.
Yep, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's all great advice. Yeah, absolutely. I think of those old toys that would like bunk into a wall and it would just back up and like keep doing the same thing. Like unless you back up and like turn a little bit, you're gonna keep hitting the same wall. And so
Mm-hmm.
when do you find that diminishing return of like
Mm-hmm.
I'm genuinely not making any progress on this. I need to take a totally different approach on this.
Mm-hmm.
Caprino asked a great question in chat. What blog sort of platform can you think of to give exposure to a dev community? Would you choose like Medium or Dev2 or use a personal domain, some combination of them?
Both. Well, no, all. Yes.
All the above? Okay.
All of them. So if you, I would definitely use well, okay, I'm going to temper my advice. If you like setting up a personal site, and that the skills involved in setting up your personal site are skills that would be relevant to the job that you are seeking, then it makes sense to set up a personal site. But if you are not going to be using like front end skills, or that kind of thing, then that's not going to be an optimal use of your time, at least not if you can't do it pretty quickly.
Mm.
um and so, but you can use a template. There are tons of them out there, And so if you have just enough, HTML and CSS knowledge, then you can use a template to set up just a basic personal site and reserve your domain. And then that helps because you can use so Medium and Dev2 and all of those will let you use what's called a canonical link. And that means that all of the traffic, all of the hits that your post gets on all of the sites that it's posted on count only toward your personal site's hit count. And that matters for SEO because otherwise Google will punish your search results if it's finding the content on multiple sites. And so, but you can still publish on Hashnode is another one. I use Hashnode. I used to be on Medium, and I'm switching to Hashnode. Hashnode, Medium, and Dev2, all of those you can use the canonical links, and so then you can publish on all of those platforms, so you can reach all of those audiences, but it still gets counted as just that one post, which matters for Google reasons.
Cool. Juggling Biohazards also asked, I'm generally a private person, not really into socials more than necessary. Has using a pen name for blogs or in general been a negative in your experience?
I don't have experience actually using a pen name, but I think if it depends on what your blog is for. If your blog is for job seeking, it should have your name on it. And there's just no way around that because you want employers to be able to find what you do, and they'd be looking for your name. So, but if you just want to share your knowledge with the world without having it be a job-seeking strategy, then sure, pen name, sure.
Cool. Driftwood is also asking about how to watch Coded Bias. They do have like a watch party thing where you can like set up like a watch party thing on Netflix, where you specify like I'm gonna watch it on this date or that date. Do you know, is there a way that you can just watch the movie without setting up like a whole watch party, Laura?
I'm checking to see whether it's still on PBS because it was. That's how I used to play it for my students. Oh, you have to have a PBS membership.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to poke around on their site. I guess it's been about 6 months since I've looked for it, so I'm not sure.
I'm kind of curious about watching it too. Cool. Well, let's do a last call for questions. If you've got other questions for Laura or myself on interview preparation, technical writing, AI ethics, which kicked off some fantastic discussion earlier, please drop those in chat. Finite Singularity question in regards to your academic PhD background. As a fellow out of academia PhD, how have you used your degree to your advantage when it comes to job seeking?
Oh, so I don't have a PhD.
Yep, me either.
I have a master's.
Okay.
But mostly I would say my degree hasn't been a particular advantage. I mean, the fact that I have a degree maybe helps, mostly not really. And it depends, I think, enormously on what your degree is in. So my bachelor's and master's degrees were both in math, and so those were sort of helpful in the sense that, especially since I was pivoting into industry, math is a technical field, and so it was sort of like, oh well, if you can do math, you can probably do this kind of code or whatever, which I don't know, but really, I don't think that it helped very much. It was a little bit disappointing, in fact, except that it shouldn't help very much, right? Like it would be garbage. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. We'll take another couple of minutes to take any last questions from folks. Otherwise, I'm gonna start trying to find someone to raid out to from here. Or Mark, if you're gonna go live today, let me know and we'll just raid over to your channel if you want to go get set up too. Yeah, this is what we do on this channel. I love having these kinds of discussions. I love hearing different perspectives on things that I wouldn't otherwise get into, like the whole AI ethics thing. That was fascinating to kind of nerd out on for a little bit. But also just hearing your journey of like going from academia into kind of where you found your place in life as a technical writer, I think has been really great. I love just hearing other people's journeys and what it's been like for you, and hearing perspectives on how would you network, how would you do research on companies, like all that kind of stuff. I think is really great. So cool. Appreciate the additional follows as well. Give everybody some blinky lights for today for that. I'm trying to find a way to like automate, when the bot sees, thanks for the follow, that it'll blink the lights for folks. That'll be the next thing that I build up. But thanks, Darth Gollum. Appreciate the feedback there as well. Yeah, I mean, drop by anytime. I love having these kinds of conversations. I think it's important for us to hear perspectives and opinions on things, even when opinions, like I've had guests on the stream where we don't agree on things, and that's okay too.
Sure.
Because I think it's important to show, hey, we can respectfully disagree. And have different perspectives on things, because I think like a lot of things in life, the more perspectives you hear, the better you're going to be able to form your own perspective and ideas, instead of listening to one person and adopting their ideas, and that's the only way that you know how to do a thing. So whether it's a resume review or how to network, or just how to deal with toxic company cultures, or communities, as we were hearing from Driftwood, like there are a lot of perspectives out there. And so I encourage everybody, listen to a lot of ideas, listen to a lot of perspectives. You're going to form better ideas yourself. This Thursday, I think we're gonna have Strager on the stream. So if anybody follows Strager here on Twitch, we're gonna have him on the stream. Hear some of his background and perspective being in tech, and how he does a lot of live streaming around giving people code reviews and helping people out in that regard, as well as just live coding just all the time. I think it'd be fantastic to come back on Thursday. So Laura, thank you so much for your time today. You're super generous with your time, giving us almost 2 hours of your time today, trying to get everything set up and so on. So appreciate that you were willing to share that perspective with us, and just kind of that background and so on. So thank you so much. Hope to have you back on the stream sometime if you're open to it.
That'd be great. And thanks so much for having me. This has been tons of fun.
Yeah, so go give Laura a follow. I've been dropping those links in chat. I'll put them in the YouTube description afterwards when this goes up on YouTube. But last chance for any questions. A lot of folks saying thanks for the answers and so on. Oh, you're gonna start a stream of your own? Well, go start streaming. We'll raid over into your channel. We got.
Oh no, I don't mean about to, like in a few minutes. I mean
okay.
like
Gotcha.
Over the next couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
Few
All right.
colleagues and I. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I've definitely got you on follow, so we'll definitely check that out too. Looking forward to that. Let's go find somebody we can go raid. Let's see. We got some makers. We got some Lego folks. We got some more Lego folks. If anybody's got suggestions, I've got an idea of who I might go raid into, but I don't know if we've ever raided into this channel, but it's a big one. Cool. I think we'll go raid over to Mutru. Cool. We'll see everybody over on her channel. So appreciate that. You will need to be a follower if you want to drop hypes and emotes and stuff in her channel. But we'll see you all over there in a couple of moments. Thanks again, Laura. Have a great Sunday, everybody.
Thanks, Ian.
Or Monday if it's already Monday where you are. And we'll catch you all on Thursday. Have a great rest of your day. Cheers.